Have you ever stood at a crossroads in your life, feeling the pull of 100 different directions at once? One voice, perhaps from a well-meaning loved one, tells you to be practical, to take the safe path. Another, from a book you've read or a mentor you admire, urges you to be bold, to take the risk. Society itself seems to shout 1,000 contradictory commands. Be ambitious, but be humble. Be independent, but be a team player. Follow your heart, but don't be a fool. You are told to fight for what you believe in, but also to turn the other cheek. You are advised to be brutally honest, and in the next breath, to be diplomatic and spare people's feelings. In this cacophony of guidance, how can anyone truly know the right way to turn? It can feel like being lost in a forest of mirrors, where every reflection offers a different map, a different truth, leaving you paralyzed by indecision, haunted by the fear of making the wrong choice. This very feeling of profound contradiction was something that deeply troubled the Swiss psychologist Marie-Louise von Franz, a brilliant mind and one of Carl Jung's closest collaborators for nearly 3 decades. Von Franz dedicated her life to the study of fairy tales. For her and for Jung, these were not mere children's stories. They were psychological blueprints, ancient maps of the human soul. Jung believed so strongly in their power that he once told her, "When you study fairy tales, you can study the anatomy of the human psyche." Von Franz immersed herself in these stories, collecting them from every culture, across every continent and historical era, searching for a universal wisdom, a set of unbreakable rules for living a meaningful life. Yet, what she discovered initially felt like a devastating failure. She found what she called the law of contradiction. For almost every piece of advice she found in one tale, she could find the exact opposite in another. One story would celebrate the hero who bravely fights the dragon, while another would praise the clever character who outwits the dragon and escapes. Some tales champion the virtue of patient endurance in the face of evil. Others insist that to not fight back is the greatest folly. There are stories that say the only way to survive a confrontation with the devil is to lie your way out, and just as many that declare you must remain honest, even with evil itself, lest you become tainted by deceit. It seemed that the collective wisdom of humanity was a grand, frustrating paradox. The map wasn't a single chart, but 1,000 overlapping, conflicting charts. She was disappointed. She had hoped for a single, clear truth. But as she sat with this contradiction, a deeper realization dawned, one that is profoundly liberating. The contradictions are the point. Life itself is a tapestry of infinite challenges and unique dilemmas. There is no single right path that fits every person in every situation. It is precisely in the act of choosing, in the tension between these conflicting moral signposts, that we are forged. It is in this space of uncertainty, where we must weigh the options and listen not to the noisy chorus of the world, but to something deeper within ourselves, that we become true individuals. As von Franz explained it, if the underlying collective wisdom wasn't contradictory, there would be no need for a conscious, free, responsible individual to rise above it. We could simply follow a pre-written script, but because the scripts conflict, we are forced to write our own. We are forced to say, the ancient stories say this, and they also say that. But I, in this moment, will do this third thing. This is my choice. This is me. The contradiction isn't a flaw in the map. It is the very thing that grants us our freedom to navigate. But then, in all her years of research, sifting through thousands of stories, von Franz found one, and only one, exception to this law of contradiction. One rule that was never, ever contradicted. One piece of advice that held true across every culture, every hero, every enchanted forest. It is a message of profound importance for our modern lives, a key to unlocking our own authentic path. And that singular, unbreakable rule is this: one must never ever harm the helpful animal in the fairy tale. What does this mean for you, for me, living in a world without talking foxes or magical birds? What is this helpful animal, and why did Jung and von Franz believe that honoring this rule was the absolute cornerstone of a psychologically healthy life? The truth is, most of us harm this creature every single day, and we suffer the consequences in silence, often without even knowing why. The decoding of this rule, according to von Franz, is beautifully simple. The helpful animal in the fairy tale is a symbol. It represents the most fundamental, instinctual, and authentic part of ourselves. It is that quiet, inner voice, that gut feeling, that sense of unshakable knowing that we call intuition or conscience. It's the internal compass that helps us discern right from wrong for ourselves, that gently nudges us toward certain paths in life and pulls us back from others. It is, as von Franz wrote, the adherence to one's own most basic inner being, one's instinctual inner self, that is more essential than anything else. In all the tales of the world, she never found a single story that suggested otherwise. The helpful animal is your conscience. Carl Jung described conscience not just as a set of learned moral rules, but as something far more personal and profound. The very origin of the word, he noted, points to a special kind of knowing or consciousness. What makes conscience unique, he wrote, is that it is a knowledge of, or a certainty about, the emotional value of the ideas we have concerning the motives of our actions. Think about that. It isn't just an intellectual list of shoulds and should-nots. It's a felt sense. When you face a critical decision or moral dilemma, your conscience speaks to you in the language of feeling. Sometimes it's a cold, heavy feeling in your gut, a wave of anxiety that screams, "No, not this way." Other times, it's a warm, expansive feeling in your chest, a quiet hum of rightness that whispers, "Yes, this is it." This inner guidance is so powerful that for millennia, as Jung pointed out, cultures all over the world have regarded it as nothing less than the voice of God speaking directly to the individual. Following this voice, listening to your helpful animal, is easy when its guidance aligns with the world around you. When your inner compass points in the same direction as the expectations of your family, the rules of your society, and the consensus of your friends, the path is clear and smooth. The real test, the moment where individuality is truly born, comes when a conflict arises. What do you do when your conscience, your helpful animal, urges you down a path that society condemns? What happens when that quiet inner knowing contradicts the loud demands of your social group, your career, or even your own ingrained beliefs about what you should do? This is the ultimate dilemma. Do you follow your inner voice, at the risk of being misunderstood, criticized, or ostracized? Or do you conform, silencing that inner voice to maintain harmony and acceptance? If this idea of recognizing your own helpful animal, your own inner voice, is already sparking a new perspective for you, take a moment to subscribe to Mind Decode Explained. We journey through these intricate landscapes of the mind together, exploring the maps that lead back to our most authentic selves. Most of us, when faced with this stark choice, choose conformity. The fear of going against the crowd, what psychologists call the normative pressure to conform, is a deeply ingrained human instinct. We are social creatures, and our survival has historically depended on belonging to the tribe. To be cast out was a death sentence. So we learn, often unconsciously, to betray ourselves. We ignore the helpful animal. We tell the quiet voice to be quiet. But this betrayal is never without cost. As Jung explained, when we deny the call of our conscience, we are often left with a gnawing, persistent feeling that we are living a lie. We might be able to rationalize our choices, to justify our actions by pointing to laws, customs, or what everyone else is doing. We can become masters of self-deception, building a fortress of righteousness around us. We can fool our friends, our family, our colleagues. We might even, for a time, fool ourselves. But deep down, Jung wrote, a voice whispers, something is not right, however much his conformity may be supported by public opinion or the moral code. This is the hidden wound that so many of us carry. It's the low-grade anxiety in a quiet room, the feeling of being an imposter in your own life, the sense of meaninglessness that can creep in even amidst success. By disregarding the voice of our conscience, by harming our helpful animal, we violate the single universal rule von Franz discovered. The great Russian novelist Fyodor Dostoevsky, a masterful psychologist in his own right, believed that our conscience is what makes us truly human. To ignore it for too long, he suggested, is to invite a profound and terrible suffering. It is not a punishment from an external God, but a natural consequence, a psychological law. The guilt, the regret, the shame, and the imposter syndrome become a kind of spiritual acid, eating away at us from the inside out. A sickness of the self, a deep psychic infection, takes root. As his biographer Joseph Frank articulated, for Dostoevsky, conscience was a natural and instinctual regulatory organ of the human psyche, whose distortion or perversion leads to a literal sickness of the self. This is a crucial reframing. The negative feelings you experience when you go against your inner knowing are not signs that you are bad. They are symptoms. They are the cries of your helpful animal, wounded and trying to get your attention. They are the psychic equivalent of physical pain, a signal that something is wrong and requires healing. The path to healing, then, is not to double down on self-criticism, but to learn to listen again, to begin tending to that inner creature you have neglected. But for those who are brave enough to embark on this journey, to start listening to their conscience and cultivating their own unique individuality, Jung offers a critical and sobering warning. The inner world is complex, and alongside the true, authentic conscience, the genuine, helpful animal that guides us toward growth and wholeness, there exists a dark twin. There is also a false or pseudo-conscience. This false conscience is a master of disguise. It can mimic the voice of truth, but it leads us down paths of destruction. As Jung starkly put it, this false conscience exaggerates, distorts, and twists evil into good and good into evil. And it does so with the same urgency and with the same emotional consequences as the right kind of conscience. This is a terrifying thought. Our own inner demons, our unresolved traumas, our egoic desires, our shadow self, can masquerade as our helpful animal. The voice of fear can disguise itself as the voice of wisdom. The voice of pride can sound like the voice of purpose. A desire for revenge can feel like a quest for justice. The inner wolf can put on the sheep's clothing of your most trusted guide and lead you straight off a cliff. Jung was clear about this duality. Right beside the positive right conscience is the negative, false one, which is properly called the devil, the tempter, the evil spirit. So how then can we ever trust ourselves? If our own inner world can be so treacherous, how do we distinguish the true helpful animal from the demonic imposter? This is perhaps the most important question on the path of self-discovery. And the answer is not a simple checklist, but a cultivated practice. Jung's advice, echoed by von Franz, is deceptively simple. When faced with a particularly difficult or emotionally charged dilemma, slow down. Do not act in haste. Any feeling of frantic urgency, of pressured immediacy, of "I have to do this right now," is a massive red flag. It is a sign that you are likely being driven by the false conscience, by the shadow wolf. A favorite saying of Jung's was, "All haste is from the devil." The false conscience operates on the fuel of reactivity. It thrives in chaos and impulsivity. The true conscience, the real, helpful animal, speaks in a different tone. Its voice is quiet, steady, and often emerges from a place of deep stillness. It doesn't scream, it whispers. It doesn't push, it nudges. This is why the practice of creating space and time is so critical. We must resist the urge to immediately solve the problem, to instantly relieve the tension of the conflict. We must, as von Franz wrote, be willing to brood long enough in the suffering of such a conflict. It's in that space of patient, uncomfortable waiting that the true path forward begins to emerge. By allowing our unconscious mind time to process, to sift through the noise, we create the conditions for the quiet voice of our authentic self to be heard. A deep, settled feeling of rightness will eventually become clear, a feeling that gives us, as von Franz said, enough certainty to go on, even at the risk of making a mistake. This willingness to sit in the uncertainty is an act of profound courage. It's what the researcher and storyteller Brené Brown might call leaning into the vulnerability of not knowing. The false conscience offers you the illusion of certainty, of a quick fix. The true conscience asks you to have faith, to trust a feeling that you cannot logically prove. It requires you to take what Jung called a leap of faith. In the moment of decision, you can never be 100% certain that you are making the right choice in some objective, cosmic sense. You have to trust the inner signal, the felt sense of your own truth, and step forward into the unknown. Jung believed this was the ultimate test of spiritual and psychological maturity. He wrote that if the voice of conscience is indeed the voice of God, or the authentic self, then it must possess a higher authority than any conventional man-made morality. Therefore, the person who honors this inner voice should put his trust in divine guidance and follow his conscience rather than give heed to conventional morality. But even with this understanding, a practical question remains. Is it always worth it? Is it worth the risk of alienating others, of being judged, of potentially losing relationships or opportunities by following this quiet, inconvenient inner voice? The cost of conformity is hidden, but the cost of nonconformity is often painfully visible. The South African author Lawrence van der Post, a man whose life and work were deeply influenced by Jung, provides perhaps the most powerful and moving answer to this question in his novel, A Far-Off Place. He paints a picture of our relationship with life as a sacred contract, and his words serve as a stunning testament to the unbreakable rule of the helpful animal. He wrote, "You see, every human being has an innate sense of contract with life. He has, it is true, an important sense of contract with the community into which he is born. But over and above that is his own special contract with life itself. This contract is entirely between him and life, and nothing, not even the community, can be allowed to suppress it, should it push him into conflict with it. This contract consists in keeping his own voice, a voice we call conscience, and no man can refuse to obey this voice and ever have any peace again. Believe me, the insecurity, the restlessness and the hostility of our neighbors which has come into our lives, because they find us at fault for breaking our contract with society, is a peace that passes all understanding when compared with what will happen to us if we break that special sense of contract which you and I have with life itself." Read those words again. The peace that passes all understanding. That is what is at stake. The disapproval of the world, he suggests, is a gentle breeze compared to the hurricane of self-betrayal. The pain of being misunderstood by others is nothing compared to the agony of no longer understanding yourself. The loneliness of walking a solitary path is a quiet garden compared to the desolate prison of a life lived inauthentically. This is the ultimate teaching of the fairy tales, the final decoding of the one unbreakable rule. Your helpful animal, your conscience, is your lifeline to that sacred contract. Harming it, ignoring it, silencing it, is the only true sin in the cosmology of the psyche. It is the one act that guarantees a life of inner turmoil, a sickness of the soul. So the journey is not about finding a perfect, flawless map that will prevent you from ever getting lost. Such a map does not exist. The journey is about learning to trust your own internal compass, your own helpful animal, even when its guidance seems strange, inconvenient, or frightening. It's about cultivating the stillness to hear its quiet whispers beneath the roar of the world. It's about having the courage to take that leap of faith, to honor your special contract with life, knowing that this is the only path that leads to true peace. It will not always be easy. You may be judged. You may be misunderstood, but you will be whole. You will be living your truth. And in the end, there is no greater success, No more profound peace than the quiet, unshakable knowledge that you have been true to the helpful animal within. What is it whispering to you, right now, in the quietest corners of your heart?